You're listening to Boomers Today with your host, Frank Sampson.
Well, welcome to Boomers Today. I'm your host, Frank Sampson. Of course, each week we bring you important and useful information on issues facing baby boomers, their parents, and other loved ones. And of course, we have another great show this week. But I first want to just thank everybody for all their support. Our listeners grow each and every day, and it's because of all of you. We don't do any advertising, so you're getting the word out to friends and family, and I really appreciate it. Many of you have downloaded our free app, Boomers Today, which you could download on your iPhone or Android phone. Many of you go on to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Stitcher, a lot of different ways to listen to the show. So thank you again for all your support. I really appreciate it. But it's because we're getting more and more listeners because we got great information and wonderful guests. And today's not going to be any different. We have with us Anthony Park. Anthony is a professional executor for Solo Agers and estates across the country. He's the author of legal guidebooks such as the Solo Ager Estate Plan and How Probate Works. He's been a practicing probate attorney in New York for over 20 years and has settled hundreds of estates. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us on Boomers Today. Really appreciate it.
Hi, Frank. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, this is I've had guests on before who do work with families and solo agers, but you have a very unique concept. So we'll talk more about it. But maybe we could just start out explaining how you define a solo ager. I don't know. We probably, people listening might have a perception of who a solo ager is, but maybe you could help explain it.
Sure. It's a great term coined by my friend and colleague, Sarah Zeff-Geber, who I think was a guest on your show before.
Yeah, I've had Sarah on the show. That's right. Yeah.
Very cool lady. But she coined the term, which I think is great because before the term solo ager, some of the alternate names that were used were elder orphan or senior ager, which, I don't know, neither of those has quite the nice ring that I think solo ager is, but that's just my 2 cents. But we generally agree that solo agers are your aging population. You can define that as 65 or older or 55 and older. That's not necessarily the most important part, but the solo part is the important part, where you either are single or widowed, and you just don't have the family support that other folks might have to help you as you age. That could mean, being childless or having estranged children. It could mean, not necessarily having the siblings, nieces, or nephews nearby, or all of the above. And we do have married folks who appreciate this kind of information because they realize that one of the two is going to die first, just to be blunt about it.
Right.
So whoever's a survivor needs to be aware of these issues. Right?
Usually we go first, huh? The guys. That's just statistics show that, right? Is that true? Usually.
What's the reason for that, I wonder?
Right. I'm interested to know, I'm sure you've done a lot of research on this or no, but I'm curious, do you think that solo agers will become even more prevalent in the years ahead, even in the next 20, 25 years with millennials and the Gen Xers aging, and statistics show that, less people are marrying, less people are having children. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. I do think that there will be an increase in this population, and for the reasons you've listed, fewer folks marrying, or at least fewer folks staying married, I guess some would say stuck in a marriage, fewer folks, or more folks, let's say more folks electing to not have children. And I also, as technology and society evolves, it seems to be becoming easier to live alone and to be alone in many ways, whether it's because you're connected and able to have social networks, online, and you're not, the risk of loneliness is a little bit abated just because of what's out there. The fear of not being able to drive around will soon be, hopefully replaced with self-driving cars. Just so many examples of how it will be easier. And that doesn't necessarily mean it'll happen, but there seem to be trends that would allow for this population to grow. Yeah.
Got it. So, in your experience, how are solo agers' needs different from a planning standpoint? So, for planning for long-term care, planning for death. I mean, the thing is, death is 100% sure. Last I checked, but long-term care, long-term care statistics show that once you turn about the age of 60, you got a pretty high probability of needing some sort of long-term care. So how are solo agers different from others?
So in terms of answering specifically to long-term care, my understanding is that that's a touchy area because most solo agers tend to age in place or stay aged in place longer than they otherwise would. And we don't have statistics on this yet, but the common sense wisdom is that it's because they don't have the adult daughter or the adult child to nudge them or to help them with the research or to do what it takes to give that momentum, to give them that, I hate to say push, but the impetus to consider leaving the family home. That's probably too big and too hard to maintain for them at a certain point for another living arrangement. So that's definitely one area where solo agers either need to figure it out on their own, or they actually end up maybe making that move a little bit too late. Yeah.
Right. Now, I'm sure you'll get into it, whether you want to get into it now, but you actually become the executor for solo agers. What about power of attorney? Because like you said just before, where you might have a adult child or a spouse nudging or saying, hey, maybe we should get you some help or some care or whatever the case may be. I deal with that every day. Do you get involved as a power of attorney or just as an executor? And maybe explain to our listeners the difference.
Sure. So the difference is that as an executor, my role is I'm a placeholder. While you're living, I'm just the person who will sort of step in the day or the day after you pass away and make sure your final affairs and your final wishes are carried out the way you've expressed. And then you can have the confidence that will happen, that you won't be leaving behind a mess, or that that your assets won't go to the wrong people. That's my role, my primary role as executor. I do also serve as a power of attorney, and there's some alternatives to power of attorney which I prefer. I'm not a big fan of powers of attorney, but for anyone who needs help during their lifetime, I do that. But it takes time to build that relationship and that trust. What usually happens is somebody will be looking for an executor in their will, and they'll find me through various ways, and will agree to have me named as the executor in their will. But then over the years, we'll have chats and updates and make sure that I understand, why they've disinherited this wayward nephew, or why they prefer to live in the city versus the country. And as I understand them, then and only then will we even start to have the conversations of, hey, Anthony, I'm feeling like I do need somebody like you as my healthcare power of attorney or my financial power of attorney. Only once we form that relationship is it something that we broach. And yes, once we do it, I do get involved with those decisions of when to move, or which rehabilitation is the best fit, and things like that. But as you can imagine, as you probably know, Frank, that those are very intimate decisions. So I really want to make sure that I know my clients well and I know their preferences.
Got it. Yep, absolutely. So when you say you're not a big fan of power of attorney, maybe just to explain, I think what, not that you meant to say, but you're not a big fan of being a power of attorney, but there's certainly an importance, tremendous importance of having a power of attorney, correct?
Oh no. I guess this will be my controversial portion of our talk.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I
Yeah.
am not a fan of.
Right.
I am not a fan of powers of attorney, the document. They are, in my opinion, extremely overpowered for what they are. Yeah.
Yeah. But really,
so you could accidentally, or
yeah, go ahead.
Well, you could give away the farm, or you could give away tremendous authority over yourself with just a dime store. Or they don't have dime stores anymore. A stationary notarization. There's no witness requirement. There's very little structure in most states to oversee powers of attorney. And the most famous example here in New York is the Brooke Astor case of this very, very wealthy Astor family. And basically, I think it was her I didn't follow that close, but I know her grandson was pilfering tens of millions of dollars, all based on this 3-page notarized, not witness, power of attorney document. And it was technically legit. In that, I mean, there was crimes did occur, other things went wrong, but the power of attorney itself was, functioning the way it was supposed to.
So, what do you recommend then to those that are alone and maybe are getting to the point that their decision-making process is not so good? Maybe they're starting with some cognitive issues, and so what do you do?
So there's two elements to that. First, especially for solo agers, I do recommend a revocable trust, sometimes called a living trust or a grantor's trust. Different states and different folks have different names for it. And before I get into what that is and why, more importantly is when. And you want to do this before you start experiencing the first signs of cognitive decline or things of that nature. It's really important to do these things early, because they're much stronger and much more defensible when you prepared them with full vim and vigor versus with a shaking hand. I hate to make it so visual, but
Yep.
When you're expressing your wishes later and closer to a real cognitive decline, I mean, a judge, an independent court examiner, they're all going to see that. Versus if this is a wish that you expressed 10 years prior to any hints of dementia, or just let's just say sliding, then you have this 10-year history of this is what my wishes were and have been for a long time. So carry them out, would you?
Right. Yeah, because certainly, I mean, you can't even go into the hospital to have surgery, at least as an adult that I'm aware of, without submitting some sort of power of attorney form. Is that correct?
I believe you're referring to the healthcare power of attorney.
Yeah,
I don't believe hospitals require a plan.
Yeah, healthcare power of attorney. Yeah.
And that's totally with I am a big fan of both the living will. I think I said living will before when I meant living trust. But the DNR, the living will, and the healthcare power of attorney. Those are all totally appropriate and important parts of your plan. My concern is specifically with the financial power of attorney, and to answer your earlier question, should be I prefer, especially for solo agers, a revocable trust. Right. And the reason for that is when you have a trust in place, it serves the same function. The point is, if you're unable to manage your finances yourself, or you need some help with your finances, you want to have somebody with the power to do that. And both those vehicles do the same thing. The difference is that the revocable trust has a whole sort of infrastructure behind it, meaning there's specific court proceedings, there's specific structures and even industries around how to make sure that's happened. How to make sure that happens, and if anything goes wrong, what the remedies are, who you can turn to. Powers of attorney don't really have that. There's no even set compensation for powers of attorney, so it can be kind of what the power of attorney decides in many states.
Yeah.
Whereas most states have trustees' fee schedules laid out very plainly. I mean, just as one example of what I mean by the infrastructure is there.
Gotcha. So, just moving on to the estate plan. I mean, that's kind of your area of expertise, and for solo agers, estate plan can really protect protect them. I guess when somebody hears estate plan, I don't know if it's a good term or not, but it just like power. I think the name power of attorney is a lousy name, because I think that scares people. But estate plan also going, well, I don't really have an estate. Why would I need an estate plan? Explain a little bit more about an estate plan and why it's important. What if somebody doesn't have a huge amount of assets?
Yeah, I think you're right. It does. The name does give off the misimpression that you have to have some sort of manor or some lofty estate to make it worth your while. But you're right, that's not true. Especially for solo agers, an estate plan actually helps protect you, not just your heirs or your assets. And what I mean by that is the term that I've come up with is you want to make sure that you're never under the control of your court-appointed stranger. There are far too many scenarios where if a solo ager gets sort of thrust into the system, you have either a guardian or a conservator, or there's just so many different names for it in different states, where you have this court-appointed person who is now suddenly in charge of very important decisions, and including health and financial decisions for you. And a good estate plan, even if you don't have a vast amount of wealth, even if you have just very blue collar or just middle class assets, having an estate plan can really, really help you avoid these kind of worrisome outcomes.
Right. Now that's scary. I've had that happen before with clients where, they may not even be a solo ager, but because they didn't do the proper planning, like you said, that their situation gets turned over to the courts. And so here you are with some stranger making decisions for you.
A couple of great examples of that, well, not great, but clear examples of that is there's a Netflix series called Dirty Money, and there's an episode called The Guardians, and it gives three kind of, it's going to make your skin crawl a little bit, but three stories of folks who had these court-appointed strangers take over their lives, and just getting out was an ordeal. And some of them haven't even gotten out yet. So it's if you want a specific idea of what that can look like, check it out. Dirty Money on Netflix. The episode called The Guardian.
That's great. Glad you mentioned that. So Anthony, we're going to just take a real quick break here and recognize our sponsor, and then I want to come back. I have some more questions for you, and then we could learn a little bit more about also your books and how people could get a hold of you. I want to remind everybody that today's show is sponsored by Senior Care Authority, an elder care consulting organization that has a national network of professionally trained and experienced local advisors to assist families in determining the right path for your loved ones. They'll discuss various long-term care options, whether it's in-home care, assisted living, memory care, nursing, or if you just need an advocate to get advice from, a local Senior Care Authority advisor can help you now. So for a free 30-minute consultation with an advisor right in your area, contact Senior Care Authority at 888-809-1231, or you could go directly to the website at www.seniorcareauthority.com, and you can find a local advisor. We're back with Anthony Park, who's a professional executor for Solo Agers. So Anthony, welcome back. And so we were talking about kind of the scary stuff of not planning properly, and the possibility of getting a court-appointed stranger, or that you or family would have to deal with. So I have a couple more questions, but before we do, just so we don't run out of time, maybe you could share with everybody how they could get a hold of you, maybe your website. Certainly let them know about your books, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. But it's commercial time for you. Go ahead. Anthony, are you there? Anthony?
Yep. Can you hear me, Frank? I'm still here.
Oh, there you are. Now I can. I wasn't hearing you before. So go ahead. Did you hear my question?
Oh, okay. Very good. I did. I can jump right in.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I've written a couple of books on these topics, so to make it easier for you to just thumb through and at your leisure. I have the Solo Ager Estate Plan and a couple others, how to hire a professional executor, how Probate Works, all available on Amazon. And if you want to get in touch with me personally, I do serve as executor mainly in New York, but I have been nominated in all sorts of states, from Ohio to Arizona to the Virgin Islands, which I'm looking forward to probating an estate in the Virgin Islands, by the way.
Yeah.
But you can reach me at anthonyspark.com. That reads anthonyspark.com, and just get in touch. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Good. Thank you for that. So what other kind of, I guess, words of wisdom or advice can you give those that are solo agers that might need assistance, or maybe it's in their personal plan to stay solo and not have children or whatever? But what kind of words of wisdom can you give to them for those that are just kind of starting to think about, well, what am I going to do? I don't have kids. I don't plan on having kids. I don't know if I'm going to marry. What suggestions do you have to those people?
So the number one thing that you should realize is that, as of now at least, your situation is not the norm, I guess you would say, and the systems are set up for spouse and children. I mean, all the default laws, all of the most of the books out there, most of the software out there is really designed or caters to spouse and adult children, right? So you have to understand that you're going to have to do some tweaking. You're going to have to do some customization and make sure, in order to make sure you get what you want. You have a plan that suits your needs. That can go from figuring out who gets what. Again, there's no, I'm going to give it equally to Jack and Jill, my son and daughter, right? That's kind of the fallback option for most parents. Or I'm going to name my oldest child as my executor. Again, that might not be an option for the solo agers we're dealing with. So you have to put some more thought into it, a little bit more mental effort. And not only that, the software out there and the advice, again, is really, really tailored to the nuclear family type situation. So really seek out expertise for folks who can help you and your situation. Right?
Got it. So solo agers, you said they typically lack, just some notes I received from you, a quote, an assumed executor. Explain that a little bit more when you say an assumed executor.
Sure. So most folks will name their spouse or their adult child as, their executor and their backup executor. But, most solo agers don't have that option. So they really run into kind of three buckets of choices. You have friends and neighbors, or somewhat distant relatives, or hiring a professional. And there's pros and cons of each. There's no right or wrong answer. You need to decide what's right for you. So with friends and neighbors, the drawback is that it's kind of a big ask to ask someone to be your executor. It's a lot of work. I don't know if Frank, have you done it before? Have you been an executor?
I have not, but I can't even imagine. I do understand how much work is involved. That's for sure. Yeah.
So, if you're friendly and you have dinner every once in a while with your neighbor, that's one thing. But to ask them to step in for a year plus and really dive into your financials and stand online at the bank and clean out your apartment, that's just a big ask.
Right. Right.
So there's that sort of hesitancy in asking a friend or neighbor. But the pro is that it's, for many solo agers, their friends and neighbors are the people who know them best. So there is that intimacy. There is that likelihood that they'll more likely know what you would have wanted to do with, the coffee table that you really loved. Or that's just a crazy example. But they'll know you best.
Yep. That's great. Yeah.
Then you have the distant relatives. And when I say distant, if there was a close relative, I wouldn't really categorize this individual as a solo ager. So it's probably a nephew or niece or sibling who they're not that close with. And the drawbacks are similar. It's kind of a big ask for someone you're not that close with. Just because you're blood doesn't mean they want to do all this work for your estate.
Right.
And then on top of that, they don't even have the level of intimacy or knowing your personal preferences, because as we've kind of outlined, it's probably someone who's not that, although they're a relative, they're probably not that close with you.
Yeah.
So that leaves us with hiring a professional. And at this stage, and there's not that many great options for most folks. And what I mean by that is, traditionally, the professional options have been banks and sort of high-end attorneys, right? Mainly serving estates or folks with net worths in the $5 million and up range, sometimes going as low as $2 million and up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not most people, just to be blunt.
Right. No, that's what I was saying about people who hear the term estate plan. They may not categorize themselves as needing one. Right.
But luckily, there's a growing movement, I guess you would call it, or a growing industry. I'm happy to be one of them, of attorneys, financial advisors, and other folks who are filling this need for, let's say, non-millionaires and millionaires, but just you don't have to be, a Rockefeller to have this sort of service available to you in this day and age.
Yeah, right. Well, Anthony, I could talk to you for a lot longer, but unfortunately, we're kind of out of time, and I just want to thank you. First of all, thank you for all you do. You help a lot of people, and that's a wonderful thing. I hope everybody checks it out. Go to Anthony S. Park, like AnthonySpark.com, and check out Anthony's books, and he's got some great information on his website. So, Anthony, thank you so much for joining us on Boomers today.
Thanks for having me, Frank.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody out there for joining us. Be safe, and we'll talk to everybody real soon.
You've been listening to Boomers Today with Frank Sampson. To learn more about today's show, visit boomerstodayradio.com and join us next time for another edition of Boomers Today.